Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I now call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Implementation Board to order. We will start by grounding our work in our theory of change, which is if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. This is a hybrid meeting, as all of our meetings will be going forward. So there is a physical location as well as virtual access. I want to thank King County Executive Dow Constantine for allowing us to host the in-person location in the Chinook building downtown in Seattle. I will now kick it to Taj, who will take roll call.
Oh, that was a typo, but it is me. Hello, everybody. Awesome. Sweet. Okay, Member Anderson. Member Caminos.
Here.
Chair Carvalho.
Here.
Member Shelmanack. I might be in public. We will come back. Member Merritts. Member Spotted Elk. Member McHenry Jr.
Sorry to be late, but I am present. Thank you.
Member Patnow.
Here.
Member Brandon. Member Reddy. Member Rankin.
Here.
Member Ross.
Here, can you also to let you know, Ben is in the public. He's asking if you can move over.
Yeah, we will get him over.
And
John is
John
here. Yeah.
John is also over there. I see him in
Sam. Yeah. Awesome. I will mark that down. Member Merritts.
Present.
And Member Spotted Elk. Member Shelmanack.
Here.
Thank you.
John Shelmanack's here.
Awesome, Chair. We have 9 present, so we do have quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin. I will now move this along to our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of Coast Salish people. We honor this land and its people past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. And at every meeting, we reserve time for public comment. If you would like to provide comments, please raise your hand in Zoom or sign up at the physical location, and Austin will call you in the order after our consent agenda. Moving us along to our consent agenda, this is to just approve the minutes from our July meeting. So is there a motion to approve?
McHenry moves the motion to approve the prior minutes.
Thank
I
you.
second.
Awesome. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstained? Awesome. The minutes are approved. And so one more thing before we move to public comment, we'd like to hear from our interim CEO, Helen Howell, with any updates she would like to share. So I'm going to kick it over to Helen.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you. I don't think I have to remind any of you that we are in a time of transition at the RHA. I've been in the interim role for almost 4 months now, and my focus is, as you know, on improving the internal operations of the agency. My goal is to have our core functions running smoothly so we can better serve our unsheltered neighbors and the public. I actually want to take this opportunity to highlight a few pieces of good news. You may have seen that our state right-of-way work continues to move people off of the state highways and into state housing. We recently resolved a site at Myers Way near West Seattle, bringing in 30 out of 36 additional folks inside. Governor Inslee visited the site earlier this week and wanted to thank all the workers and show his support for the effort. In total, across King County, the right-of-way work has brought more than 320 people inside. And I want to give a sincere thank you to our outreach partners at REACH and PDA, our housing providers at PDA, Urban League, and Lifelong, and our state partners at WSDOT, the Washington State Department of Transportation, all for their incredible work and partnership. In addition, I'd like to note that the State Department of Commerce just released an RFP last Friday to provide counties in the State Right-of-Way Initiative additional one-time funds for this year and next year. Applications are due at the end of October, and KCRHA staff have begun working to prepare our response, including consideration of how best to engage agency partners in the process. At the federal level, we are in the middle of putting together our annual application to HUD for funding for our continuum of care. As you know, KCRHA is the collaborative applicant, and we're responsible for both renewal of previously awarded HUD grants and the pursuit of any new possible funding. There are 55 renewal grants this year for a total of $55.5 million. Also this year, HUD made available up to $4 million in new permanent housing bonus funding and $2.2 million in new domestic violence bonus funding. You may or may not recall that last year, $4.5 million in bonus funding was made available. We ended up proposing 7 new grants totaling that amount and won all of them for the COC, maximizing available funding. This year's application is due on September 28th, and our team is feeling good about the submission and the fact that we were able to get sufficient proposals through an RFP process to pursue every available dollar. I also want to highlight some of the sub-regional partnership work. Our East King County partners came together in person recently for a sub-regional planning workshop hosted by the city of Issaquah, and they worked through action steps for implementing the 5-year plan. Our North King County partners have pooled funding for severe weather response this winter, and we just posted an RFP to seek a service provider for that work. So I just note that, we're making progress on moving people inside, and we're making progress on, internal process improvements. And I deeply appreciate the support of this board, all our staff and partners as we continue to work through this time of transition. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, CEO Howell. We are going to now move on to public comment. We have 10 minutes for public comment. If you would like to comment, please raise your hand in Zoom or sign up in person, and Austin will call on you in the order received. Each person will have 1 minute to comment, and we ask that the comments be related to today's agenda. We will start with the people on Zoom, and then if there are any people in the room and would like to speak, we will move on to them. Public comment is now open. Austin, will you call on people for public comment?
Absolutely. Oh, Taj, thank you for sharing your screen. We do not have anybody present here in the Chinook building. So we will just be going off Zoom. First one up is Anitra Freeman.
Thank you.
Anitra, your 1 minute will begin as soon as you speak, and your mic does work.
Okay. Thank you. Women in Black just stood vigil again for 30 more people who died outside of violence in King County. Homeless people. The number of women dying outside of violence has tripled this year. On August 16th, we wrote a letter to you and to the city and to the mayor asking for humanity. We need more women's shelter, and there is a space available behind the red walls at City Hall. We have not even gotten a response yet. Please respond to the letter. Helen, one of those letters was directly to you. Please respond and please act. People are dying. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Next up we have is Yolanda. Yolanda, if you want to test your mic, and then your 1 minute will start as soon as you're done talking.
Yes,
Or
can you
start
hear
talking?
me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. My name is Yolanda Sinde here from Africatown International to urge King County Regional Homelessness Authority to continue their partnership with us to help people prevent homelessness through rental assistance, moving costs, and for assistance with other expenses to move them from homelessness to housing. We understand our funding is under threat and we encourage you not to stop this partnership. We have hundreds of people on our waiting list. I'm representing all of those clients that have sent in statements. I'd be happy to send them to you saying, please, we need this resource. Over 75% of the people we serve are African Americans who are struggling to pay the high cost of rent in King County, not just Seattle, throughout King County. And so we are a viable, critical partner in the mission of King County Regional Homeless Authority to stop homelessness. And we're just here today to encourage you to continue our funding. We have a proven long-term success rate. We have hundreds of agency partners. One of them is here and is also going to speak. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming out. Africatown, you should be allowed. Africatown International on Zoom. If you want to test your mic.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, and may I ask if you are willing to present a name?
Yes, I'm Malachi Kane, Executive Director of Africatown International.
Awesome, perfect. Malachi, your 1 minute starts as soon as you talk.
Okay, as my colleague just stated, we are a community partnership, or have one, and in question is this partnership. A lot of times we're the last line of defense for individuals and families before they go homeless after experiencing a housing crisis. A lot of times we're met with an ever-evolving culture of bureaucratic elitism when it comes to the regional authority. So that's what I mean when I say that I'm really trying to define or see this partnership. We're fighting rent-raising landlords and property owners and credit checkers and domestic abusers, so that you don't have to, and so that our clients can stay stably housed. I just want to remind you that we're dealing with people that we're accountable to. And it would be nice if we could feel like there were people on the other side of that understood that and treated everyone the same.
Thank you. Your 1 minute, thank you. Next up is Bill Curlin-Hackett. Bill, if you want to test your mic, and then after the test, your 1 minute will begin.
I have a question, Austin. Is Dawn Shepard on the list?
Yes.
I would like to follow Dawn Shepard, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dawn Shepard, you were next. So Dawn, if you want to test your mic, and then your 1 minute will start after your test.
Great. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dawn Shepard. I use she, her pronouns. I am a program manager at REACH. I am a member of the Vehicle Residency Policy Work Group that has been working with the KCRHA since the very inception of it having been stand up. On November 1st, 2021 was the very first meeting that we had for the policy work group. We have created all of the service models that are in the 5-year plan for KCRHA, and we're trying to move forward a service model that can be brought to scale around the city, basically because the providers involved that have the RFP contracts for this work are willing to do this extra work on our own. And part of the challenges that we're running into is that we've now been informed that we are not actually recognized as a formal policy work group. And so I am here to ask you today to formally do that so that we can have a reciprocal communication relationship with the KCRHA and their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Alrighty, Bill, you are up. Want to test your mic, and then after your test, you got 1 minute.
Thank you, Bill Curlin, Hackett Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness. I am also part of the Vehicle Residency Work Group since it was began by Mark and Naomi and Alexis. We are not formally part of this, and we've been advised by those in the know within the city that we should become officially a part of it. We are all better informed than the entire rest of the KCRHA. No offense to anybody. Vehicle residency is unique. It requires those who have done the work in the field, as we have and are still doing the work in the field. The problem we end up having when we're not an official work group is you don't consider anything we recommend. You never see it. The governing board never sees it. We did present to you more than a year ago, but we weren't an official work group under KCRHA then. So please pass a resolution that we are officially part of the KCRHA. You will have oversight of us as a result, which you don't have right now. And we will be able to agree with how the funding is delivered and how the people on the streets are helped.
Thank you, Bill. Your 1 minute is up. Awesome. Next up we have is Ada O in Zoom. Ada, if you would like to test your mic, and then after that, your 1 minute begins.
Okay. My name is Ada Onyali. I work for DAWN, Domestic Abuse Women's Network. I'm here to ask for continued funding of Africa Town International's diversion funds. The diversion funds have really been a lifesaver to many of our clients, and it's not just cliche. The flexible nature of some of the funds have been very helpful to the needs of many of our clients that have been maybe navigating some uncommon barriers. We all know whether it's for rental assistance or whether it's transportation to enable clients flee to safety, whether it's where they have family support. It's been really very helpful. And the facilitators, Yolanda, Christine and her group have been very trauma informed, whether it's driving to our office, to the different offices to give the checks.
Ada, your 1 minute has concluded. Thank you.
Okay.
Michelle Eastman. Michelle Eastman, I have given you permission to talk. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and your 1 minute will begin after your test.
Okay, thank you.
We hear you.
Great. Hello, I'm Michelle Eastman from the LEC, Lived Experience Coalition. I'm here to urge the Implementation Board to ensure that the Ombuds office remain a joint office per the original MOU. How can the office hold the KCRHA accountable if the office is only accountable to the KCRHA? That's my main concern with having a singular office. So I encourage the office to be made into a joint office. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up, we have Courtney Love. Courtney, I've given you permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then after the test, your 1 minute will begin.
Not the usual Courtney Love.
Oh,
Hi, I am the Director of State and Local Advocacy for the Lived Experience Coalition, and I, like Michelle, am here to encourage you all to ensure that the Ombuds office stays at the very least a joint office. The original goal was to make it a completely independent office. Having a joint office was the compromise, and now there's chatter about even losing that. And like Michelle said, how do you keep check on something when your paycheck is reliant on that thing? She said it better. So thank you. Keep it a joint office or make it independent office, but it cannot be solely housed under the KCRHA. It's an ethics and morality issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last one on Zoom signed up is KCRHA Floyd. Hi, KCRHA, you've been given permission to speak. If you can unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute will begin then.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, my name is KCRHA Floyd. I'm the Director of Community Partnership and Base Building for Lived Experience Coalition. And I'm here to ask you to please keep the Ombuds office a joint office with the AE. It is imperative that oversight comes from different people with different perspectives. It will fail. I understand it will fail if it's only under the umbrella of one person or one org. It needs to be spread out and have that diversity of experience come in and bring some sort of open to it. I can't even looking at the clock. I also want to talk to vehicle residency, which I've been in since the exception, that you make us a part of KCRHA so that we go through. We've been here for 2.5 years doing nothing but spinning our wheels. We need your support, and we ask for that today.
Thank you, KCRHA. Chair, again, no one is here in Chinook building but myself. So I will pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you everyone who gave public comment. Public comment is now closed. And before I move us on to the next thing on the agenda, I just want to circle back to the CEO updates. I realize I did not leave time for anyone to ask questions of CEO Howell. So if anyone has questions, this would be a great time to elevate them.
Gordon here, I had one, but I thought Ben was in front of me, so.
I did. Sorry, I was looking to raise my hand.
Go for it, Ben.
You can go ahead, Gordon. No rush. Yeah, I have a couple questions and I'll just pose them in order and you can take them however you like. Firstly, I think it's really great news that we're making progress on the right-of-way initiative and that we may have more funding to continue to grow that. I think it's been really one of the success stories. My question is, when we're doing that work, are we using the funding to create new housing units, either emergency housing or permanent housing? And the reason why I ask that is because I know that overall we don't have anything near enough housing. And so if we're doing the right-of-way work and we're not creating more housing, we're just kind of squeezing the toothpaste around the tube. So I just want to understand our approach to really addressing the issue and having good places for people to go, whether they come from the right-of-way or somewhere else. That's one question. And the second question is just, I was hoping for an update on our plans for the PIC count in January, if we're planning to do it, and if so, will it be a census approach as we did in the past, or more of a survey-based approach as we did it 2 years ago?
Okay, I'll start with Ro, your first question. I think what's unique about Ro is that it includes both funding for hoteling as use for shelter, as well as permanent housing funding. What's unique is the permanent housing funding. We often don't have that funding, and that's what has enabled the success of the program. With regard to the PIT, I know that we're still in negotiations with HUD as to what that will look like, but I certainly can put you in touch with Owen Kafitz, our Chief of community impact, who is leading those negotiations, and get more detailed. And if the whole group would like to hear a briefing, we can arrange for that to happen as well.
Sorry, so just a follow up on the row work. So it sounds like we are able, because of the funding level, we are able to invest in growing the housing supply. I would very much love to see just a tracker on that in particular. Just how are we growing our shelter inventory? How are we growing our housing supply overall through the row initiative or other things? That is based on my strong belief that without having more places for people to go, we'll never be able to move people out of unsheltered homelessness. And so to the extent that we can start to have regular updates on that critical metric, I think it'll be a big part of helping us track our goal towards getting everybody inside as in the 5-year plan. And I very much look forward to the update on the PIC count. I know January is just around the corner, so keen to do that. I personally believe it's the PIC count is such a critical data series. I personally feel like we're kind of flying blind a little bit here without that data on how much work we have to do to bring everybody inside. So very keen to get that again. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jeff,
CEO,
something to say?
Yeah, thank you. I can provide a real update to some degree to answer your questions, Member Merritt's. As you know, because we talked about this board authorized entering into a master lease for a large number of units at a single location. I'm glad to report that is a fully occupied location at this time. The second component that we had proposed was to acquire a building that will be operated by the Low Income Housing Institute. That has been substantially delayed. It was initially supposed to open in February. Construction delays were the primary culprit in that delay. We understand right now that it will open in mid-October. That's 52 units. Then we also have completed a procurement process, and that's why Lifelong was mentioned earlier on our list of providers, which applied to operate at least 100 units of, again, master leased apartments. And we are in the process of moving forward with some additional leases there that would come to the board for an authorization, depending on the scale of the leasing. And then so that's the range that we're at right now. And then we are examining the recently released RFP, which is just one-time funding. A good use of one-time funding is capital needs. And so we are trying to explore, how that might best be utilized.
Thanks, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you. Chair McHenry? I'm sorry, Member McHenry?
Yes, that was subtle, but I declined. Thank you.
I was trying to put it forward. February is around the corner.
Yeah, quick question, a serious question. Reflecting on the CEO comment, really appreciate the update by Interim CEO Howell. Are there things you need from this implementation board to continue that kind of impact along the goals that you have, or are there things you want us to stop doing to enable you to have continued success? So that's the first question, more of or less of. And then I do have a clarification, perhaps similar to Sarah's question, but slightly different, which is listening to public comment. Do you have a sense of the concerns about continuation of funding? Is that diversion funds, number one? And are those funds controlled by the RHA, or are they funds that may be from a different funding source? So I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other. I'm just trying to clarify, what is this funding that folks from Africa Town and maybe one other organization were concerned about? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
In terms of things I need or support I could use, nothing's coming immediately to mind, but I have no doubt that I will reach out in the future as I do need that assistance. In terms of diversion, yeah, our funders, I think that's City of Seattle funding, and our funders will kind of determine whether there will be funding available. It's my understanding that the funding is scheduled to expire at the end of this year. But the budget process, as you know, is underway. The mayor's office and the executive's office are, busy getting their budgets in order, and then the process will begin in earnest when the councils get involved as well. Thanks.
Member Rankin?
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. I also wondered if it would be possible, in terms of the public comment, for a couple of issues that were raised, in terms of how groups might become an official part of the KCRHA. I don't know how that might work, but I wondered if someone at the KCRHA could advise us in advance of our next meeting or at our next meeting. And also the same thing with respect to the public comment about assuring the neutrality and independence of the ombudsperson. So I'm not expecting the answers at this point, but wondering if we could please ask someone at the KCRHA to update us just as follow-up on the public comments.
Yeah, I'm have to admit that I am unaware of other official quote unquote groups of KCRHA. So definitely I would need to inquire with staff and find out more. I'm unaware of others in existence. I know that we have work groups all the time, but certainly we'll find out more for you, Member Rankin. And your other, with regard to the ombuds, we do have a presentation this afternoon. I think there's a long history that delayed the hiring of staff, and we finally do have staff on board. There were labor issues involved, among others. There was the fact that the LEC was not in a 501c3 or other type of legal entity at the time all of this was entered. And there's a lot of history since then. So I don't know how to speak to neutrality, but I would point out one thing. The Ombuds' responsibility is to support the entire system, and it's holding the system accountable. KCRHA as part of the system certainly is a part of it, but it's not a watchdog group of the KCRHA. We're all about the systems change and generating results that we all desire. So I can provide more history, I can talk with staff, but I'm not sure how else. I know that this board has met a couple times and had detailed discussions about this. So I'm not sure how else we can be helpful. If you have suggestions, I'm certainly open.
I don't have suggestions at this time, but I do think that the independence point is a really important one. And so I'd like to hear the presentation that's slated and see how that might speak to some of the concerns. Every time I've seen an ombudsman's office, it's structured in some way as to be independent of the organization, and I don't necessarily see that here. So I would like to see what how the presentation this afternoon speaks to that, and maybe we can follow up at the next before the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. I am actually going to move us along just so we can stay on time with the agenda. But if there are other questions about CEO Howell's updates, can we all please send them to Austin, and then we will make sure to get those answered. I want to move us along for us to get financial briefing. We will have Helen introduce us to our new CFO, Bill Reichert, who has been with the authority for 8 weeks and has done some amazing work in putting together these financial reports for us.
Yeah, we're very excited to get a true CPA and the expertise of, a couple decades of experience in terms of Bill Reichert's strong background in compliance, government contracts, internal controls, financial reporting and change management. So Bill, we're very happy to have you, and I'm sure that this board is very happy to have a financial report.
Thank you for that introduction, Helen. I'm happy to be here, and give me just a moment here. I'm going to share my screen for my presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can, Bill.
Okay, so I'll begin. So thanks, everyone. This is a financial overview. It's through June 30th, or the end of Q2 of this year. And the agenda for this is brief background, which Helen's kind of already alluded to. And then we'll go over contracts year to date, and as well as then our operating budget versus the current revised budget, financials at a high level, and then current process improvement initiatives that we're looking at. So I'll skip the first part since Helen did a great introduction there. In my short time here, Helen and I have talked about the priorities, and we're currently dedicated to improve internal processes, improve customer service focus for contracted providers, as well as our internal customer service focus, working with amongst ourselves and teams, and then really focus on the core functions of the agency. So this is where we are in the way of contracts year to date. It was presented to the board that the anticipated contract level was going to be about $220 million. And we're currently, as of June, this was as of June, $168 million in contracted funds. This pie represents the whole 168 million is the way this slide works. And then this 73 million here represents the amount of spend so far on those contracts. And that represents 44% of the overall contract value. This next slide is that same 168 million. And the way that each of these bars works is it's the 3.1 million is the entire bar. And then the orange is the spend, and the percentages over here are the spend as it relates to the overall value for each of the programs. And what I want to highlight here is shelter services is our largest program at $93 million, followed by rapid rehousing at $31 million. And then you'll notice over here that this is the spend level of each of these so far year to date. You'll notice that Safe Lots is at 10% and EHV is at 24%, which are on the lower side. And that's primarily due to them being stood up rather late in the contracting process. And then, our team is actively, they have this data, actively working with providers to do as best we can in assisting them and deploying the resources. And we're actively reaching out and ensuring that that's occurring. So I mentioned the $220 million presented in the April IB meeting. And the intent of this slide is to bridge that gap, or the delta between the 168 and the 220 million. So for instance, we had anticipated originally in transferring from King County about $66 million in HUD COC contracts. And we transferred about 18 million of those contracts when there was a pause placed on the transfer of those, as HUD wanted to do a benchmarking monitoring process before transferring any additional ones. And that monitoring actually just recently concluded. And so we'll be getting a report on that in the next few weeks. We anticipate that the resumption of those contracts will happen early in Q1 of this coming year. So with regard to HUD, Department of Commerce, or excuse me, ROW, Department of Commerce, sorry about that, the ROW initiative, which was mentioned earlier. We were awarded $30 million in funding, and that's a June 30 year end. Unfortunately, we were only able to deploy $12.9 million of that contract for the 2022-2023 year. And as a result, Roe recently gave us an amendment that reduced that 30 million back to by 17 million, which is the number here. But since we had budgeted 30, I wanted to show it in this and how it affected our overall number. With regard to City of Seattle, we had budgeted $137 million in contracted spend with them. As of June, we still had 18 million in pending awards yet to happen. And we've since awarded much of this, but at the time that was the number. So, and then for King County HEN projects, we had anticipated transferring 23.5 million in the original budget. Yet, as of this moment, that has not been transferred. The 6 million that's represented there was the revised budget number, and that was to begin at the beginning of Q4, which we now anticipate that will begin very late in Q4, or maybe even start in the beginning of Q1 of the coming year. So that total is 55 million, and as a result, bridges the gap between that 220 and the 160. Next, I want to take you through the our operating budget for the year. So what was presented to the board in April, plus a slight little revision, is $20 million associated with covering internal administration and operations. As a result of the Commerce amendment that I got, I went back through all of the funding levels and did what I call an R1. This is normally done in the process of looking at the year as you go along anyway, and looking at your budget and adjusting them as it goes throughout the year. And this will become a regular process going forward. So we had anticipated that we were going to get from that $30 million, 3.9 million in admin related support of those programs to help deploy those funds and such. As a result of the spending level we talked about before and where we are at the moment, I anticipate that number to only be 1.4. So that's a significant part of the revision here. And then we had anticipated $5.1 million for We Are In P4Z, and we have commitments at the moment of $3.7 million, although I will note that we're currently in the negotiations to see about bridging that gap. But this is a conservative estimate, so it's where we are at the moment. And I wanted to inform the board kind of where things are and where they stand as in the way of firm commitments at the moment. This is where we are at June 30th as it relates to spending and budget. So the blue is the revised budget that I just showed you, the $16 million. And it's $8.1 million through June would be the revised budget. Yet our spend through June is $8.6 million, or our burn rates in excess by 472,000 at the moment. So since this was recently discovered, we're looking at ways to reallocate funds, reduce spending, and address the issue. And we'll be coming back to the board in the near future with our potential solutions associated with this. And as I mentioned, we will have regular financial reviews going forward to have adequate time to respond to any of these changes that occur throughout the year. So in my short time here, been working with Helen and the rest of the core team, and we've stood up several improvement initiatives. For instance, we established an SLA, or a service level agreement, that basically staff is to respond to internal and external providers and within a 24-hour period. And then we also stood up a number of cross-functional work teams to tackle our new monitoring program, as well as working with providers on contracts and other issues. So really working collaboratively together to support our programs out there. I've been in the midst of evaluating our system lifecycle, which is our ERP system, which is Enterprise Resource Planning for those people that don't like acronyms. And it's really the whole life cycle from the RFP process all the way through to invoicing and reporting. And we're looking for ways to enhance our configurations, reduce manual processes. Are there add-ons that we can do to the system and refine that, that process? We're doing that same thing for RFPs and contracts, which has also been identified as an area that we want to improve. We're also in the midst of establishing standard operating procedures system-wide to document things so we have good processes and repeatable processes around those things. Finance for our financial reporting system, we're establishing a monthly close process with reconciliations and reviews and flux analysis and all of that. Since we're coming into our contracting period, we're actively engaged in ways we're going to make that streamlined this year and get that accomplished by the end of the year. And those are some of the things that we have going on at the moment. And thank you for your time, and that concludes my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Do anyone have questions for Bill? Member Merritt, I see your hand raised.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks, Bill. It's a real breath of fresh air. Welcome to the team here. You're like I think that the team we've had here has been the startup team, and now we're like getting ready for the IPO, and we bring in the heavy hitter to whip us into shape. So thank you for taking on this important assignment, and thank you to everybody under your team. I'm sure they've had to do a lot of work to build the systems that you're describing here as well. I have a specific question around payments to service providers. I was having conversations in the last week with 2 different service providers who just say they still haven't been paid. I did see the slide that you showed, which had contracting on it, and it looks like we're making progress on that. And I don't know if that's the same thing as making payments. I'm wondering if you track if you have an accounts payable aging that you create, or maybe these payments aren't even getting into the accounts payable process. Is there something we can do to keep track of what service providers believe they should be paid and our kind of pipeline of working through that, and whether we think those requests are reasonable, not reasonable, they require contracts, just something to be able to show the service providers and the public that this organization is fulfilling its core responsibility of being a good partner for the service providers, who are in turn being good partners for the people experiencing homelessness.
So appreciate the comments there, and the question regarding what we're doing. So I have weekly meetings with all the respective groups on these types of issues, and I believe our number is 14 to 30 days on or less on all provider invoicing processing at the moment, as far as from when we receive it to if it's been turned around or rejected or sent back and payment issued. So I don't believe there's an issue there, but if you have a couple of people that have reached out to you, I don't know if you want to do it in this forum or separately send me their names, and we will certainly see what the issue is, but I'm not aware of any lengthy outstanding provider invoices at the moment.
Okay, I'll follow up with an email. Thank you, Bill.
Any other questions for Bill? Awesome. Well, thank you for the presentation, Bill, and welcome. We will now be moving on to the Ombuds Office report. We will hear from Chief Ombudsperson KCRHA Jordan on some of the changes in the office, and she will be giving a presentation. So KCRHA, all you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And what do you see on the screen? A PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Correct. So Chair, members of the committee, my name is KCRHA Jordan, and I serve as the Chief Ombudsperson for the Regional Homelessness Authority. I also use she, her pronouns. Now, the purpose of the Ombuds is to provide a mechanism to provide information, resolve concerns, investigate complaints from agency constituents, and to promote system accountability. Now, I'm here today to provide a refresher on the Ombuds office, share information on who we have served to date, and provide updates on the current work of the office. So the main functions of the Ombuds office are to, one, provide customer service by resolving issues with complaints and helping community members navigate and find resolutions to service inquiries. Two, community engagement that is proactive and not just reactive to the inbound inquiries and complaints we receive. And three, systems change. So if the office operates as intended with the first two functions, it will be able to drive systems change twofold. First, by centering the voices of people with lived experience, and second, through building and maintaining strong relationships with providers with the aim of improving services for all within the homelessness response system. Now, the interlocal agreement, which governs RHA's activities, it lists out the responsibilities of the Ombuds office, some that I've already mentioned, including resolving concerns, investigating complaints, collecting data, gathering feedback to improve the operations and outcomes, not only of the agency, but also as a system as a whole. Now, to address some of the concerns that came up earlier, it is the interlocal agreement that contemplates the Ombuds office as a division within the Regional Homeless Authority. And for the most part, the Ombuds office essentially functions as a grievance handling customer service desk. Now, I have spoken to the committee before, and I have shared about the different types of Ombuds offices. Not all Ombuds offices look the same, and this one definitely was thought of to be conceived differently as a hybrid model of kind of the classical Ombuds that I'm sure you're referencing, Professor Ranking, as advocacy Ombuds that you see in long-term care situations, and as kind of the organizational Ombuds, which you see kind of in college departments. Now, Ombuds offices, one of their core values is independence. I do think that KCRHA and our office has tried to do what we can to make it as independent as possible. Of course, the ideal will be for it to be an independent agency, but I don't necessarily think that is the purpose for what we're doing here. I think it matters that we are part of this agency because it allows us to have context about what's going on and see things from the inside so that we are in a better position to advocate for the community as a whole. That said, we don't have control over the ILA. The ILA itself would need to change, and that is how the ILA contemplated the office, not as a joint office with the LEC, but as a division within KCRHA. So the Ombuds office also serves these three main constituent populations. One, community members served by an RHA-funded program. Two, providers who receive funding from the RHA. And three, employees and other contractors of the RHA. With that said, the interlocal agreement does offer a scope around the types of complaints, concerns, and issues the Ombuds can respond to and investigate. This scope consists of 4 areas: delivery of services, program administration, policies, and other activities overseen by the authority. Now, this means that the Ombuds office has the authority to review, investigate, come up with strategies to resolve issues related to these 4 areas. Now, the interlocal agreement does not define these 4 areas, but this is how we have interpreted it. Program administration refers to RHA's contract management and program oversight responsibilities, as well as the program administrative responsibilities of contracted service providers. Policies likely refers to decisions or courses of action taken by KCRHA or a contracted program to address a concern. delivery of services is interpreted to mean all the participating facing activities that are carried out to ensure that the program participants receive the necessary assistance and support they need. So think about outreach, case management, tenancy support, and things like behavioral health coordination. And then 4 other activities overseen by the authority, which would include RHA system administration of continuum responsibilities, such as the coordinated entry system or HMIS. So if any issue does not fall within these 4 areas, it's likely not within the Ombuds office scope of authority. With that said, I do think these issue areas also give the Ombuds office discretion to serve constituents who are being served by programs that participate in the homeless response system, but are not being funded by the RHA. So for example, there are programs that the RHA does not fund, but coordinated entry still refers clients to for services or programs or there are other organizations that may participate in HMIS, but are not necessarily funded by the RHA. So what happens when the Ombuds office is contacted? So a constituent contacts the office, and Ombuds does an initial review and intake. The Ombuds or the Ombuds team as a whole assesses what's the best service to provide to help address the issue presented to the office. Now we have grouped those services in 3, arguably 4 categories: information and referral, assistance and facilitation, program review, or investigation. Now, information and referral refers to a process where we educate and provide information about resources in King County and provide information about services that people can be referred to. Assistance and facilitation is where we connect with providers when there has been a disconnect in services and try to work to bridge that gap between the program participant and the provider. Now, we'll also initiate a program review when the issue doesn't arise to the level of an investigation, but is something concerning enough that either KCRHA's program team needs to review, or it warrants a review by another entity like King County's homeless housing program, since they still have a number of service contracts that have not necessarily transitioned yet to RHA. Now, with investigations, our investigations are divided into 2 categories. The first category is programmatic investigations, which I would describe as a fact-finding process to learn what needs to be improved and what tools a program needs in service of its program's participants. Really not trying to think of investigations as an adversarial thing, but really kind of a tool and a pathway towards improvement. I would say the distinction between a program review and a programmatic investigation really is based off of trends that we might be seeing and hearing about a specific program. The second category of investigations focus on issues and concerns related to trends impacting components of the homeless response system. So for example, improving the ways people access the services within the system, the regional access points. Now, the aim of our investigations, as I mentioned earlier, is that we want to share our findings with the appropriate entity, whether that's the RHA's program team, other RHA divisions, or outside entities, so that they will work together with service providers to implement those recommendations and make a connection to the appropriate tools a provider may need to build that gap or to bridge that gap between kind of what's in a contract and best practices. Of course, this is ongoing work, and we, along with providers, are continuing learning through this process. Now, this slightly varies from, I believe, the slides that you were sent, but to date, KCRHA's Ombuds Office has served 478 constituents. As I mentioned, it differed slightly from the initial slide deck that was sent because that was the best data that I had at the time. However, now that I've been able to bring on an incredible team, I've been able to review the data at a more detailed level, and I'm more confident in this number and the following data that I will share. So this slide indicates the types of contexts the Ombuds Office has responded to over the past 2 years. As you can see, the office in 2022 served 115 people, And in 2023, to date, we have served 363 people, which represents, I believe, about a 215% increase in the number of people served since last year. As you can see, most of the contacts we receive are requests for support and facilitation or requests for help. And just to kind of explain the categories a little bit, a complaint is when, of course, someone is expressing dissatisfaction with the situation. And I think we would say that a comment or concern, it doesn't rise to the level of a complaint, but it's when someone wants to share their thoughts, concerns, or observations about a particular issue. This is another slide that just kind of highlights the services provided. Again, most of the services provided are concentrated in that information and referral category, which, as I mentioned before, involve educating and providing information in King County about the services that people can be referred to. So here I've listed just some Ombuds case examples that we pulled out from some of the cases that we worked on. We've assisted young adults and their case managers in resolving disputes around program requirements. We've helped constituents secure housing voucher after months of unsuccessfully connecting with their caseworker. We've worked with program participants to obtain moving expenses they were promised from providers. And one of my personal favorites was providing information to a young person experiencing homelessness about what rights are available to them under current higher education law. And that speaks to just kind of my passion for the intersection between the homeless response and education systems. So for the majority of 2022 and 2023, the Ombuds office has been at limited capacity with either one or two staff or people responsible for responding to inquiries. So we haven't had the time to fully embark on a community engagement plan until now. As I mentioned earlier, I have an amazing team who not only have lived experience, but have a keen understanding of the homelessness response system, who are also committed to approaching our community engagement work from a place of humility, curiosity, but also commitment to engaging in ways that are not just extractive. So our community engagement plan process has 5 components. 1, system and community mapping. Our team is beginning to map out this work, starting with kind of the coordinated entry subpopulations, because those populations do really form kind of the basis of the way our current system is set up. That's single adults, veterans, American Indian, Native and Indigenous populations, families, and youth and young adults. We will be adding 3 additional groups. We also, such as the groups that the sub-regional planning team has engaged with, our own KCRHA divisions, as well as mutual aid and advocacy organizations. Now, once we've done some mapping within each of these areas, we will then use the 5-year plan as a guide to refine our mapping to ensure our engagements are focused on reaching those providers who serve those 13 or so underserved populations that were mentioned in the 5-year plan. Now, once we begin the work of establishing relationships with communities across the region, we would like to set up regional mobile clinics so that we are meeting people where they are. We would also like to set up provider and constituent office hours, and to do kind of like an annual workshop, not only about the Ombuds office and what services the Ombuds office can provide, but also really a homeless system 101, because so many people do not understand the way the homeless response system works. And having information is really, powerful for people to be able to know how to navigate and seek services. Now, the third step, based on the information we collected through our initial engagements in the first 2 components, ongoing activities, incoming inquiries as well, we'll monitor for trends and then evaluate what focus engagements do we need to help us to understand emerging or current systemic issues or problems. From there, we hope to make recommendations based on issues we are seeing, monitor how those recommendations are being implemented, and then, of course, ensure transparent communication between RHA and its constituents. And this process will likely continue itself and hopefully inform the agency's emerging continuous improvements efforts. Now, we really believe that this approach lets KCRHA meaningfully implement its theory of change of centering people experiencing homelessness while being grounded in equity, which, you know, recognizes that people have specific needs, and we seek to try to meet those needs with specificity. This community engagement approach also holds the Ombuds team accountable to centering the voices of people with lived experience across the region and not just elevating the voices of a few select individuals. And so, you know, our goal with our engagement, we do not want to tokenize people's experience. We want to make sure that we are including the diversity of the homeless experience and just how it may manifest differently for each person or household. And I believe that is, you know, my information upload on the Ombuds office. I have not seen the questions. From my understanding, I'm happy to make myself available after this call, but I will defer to Paula on how you want to proceed.
Awesome. We have some wiggle room in the agenda, so we have ample time if there are any questions for KCRHA right now. Nate, did you come off mute to speak? Nope.
No, just to recognize Pastor Anderson verbally out loud. Join us.
I actually respond to something that I see from Sarah Rankin. So Sarah, there are organizational ombuds, right? They do have a set of ethical standards. Then you also have your classical ombuds, which I believe the American Bar Association actually has model standards around. They are not the same standards. And then of course you have your long-term ombuds, which also have standards, but they're often governed by legislation, right? What we are working with is what we have in Section 6 of the interlocal agreement. I also want to be very clear that this Ombuds office is not like a traditional Ombuds office, right? The only other Ombuds office, I think the city of Sacramento is working to create one, and then there's one in New York City that was set up for their shelter system. They do not operate at all from a traditional Ombuds model. In many ways, it's kind of Ombuds in name only, where they're providing customer service and customer support to individuals who are navigating the New York shelter system. So we are taking from all these different places. Now, if there is concern about the independence of the office, or particularly my independence, we have tried to put safeguards there. I don't know if I mentioned earlier that I am reporting regularly to the executive board of this committee. And if there are any disagreements between my office and KCRHA, that is a pathway for there to be additional oversight.
Thank you for that, KCRHA. Member Merritt, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Paula. Thank you, KCRHA, for the presentation. Well delivered as always. I guess I'm just confused. So is the Ombudsman independent of the KCRHA?
Not the way that it's conceived of in the interlocal agreement, no.
Okay, because I don't want to get into like a semantic debate about what's in there. I do happen to have the ILA open, and it says the Office of the Ombudsman shall report directly and independently to the Implementation Board on trend, customer, and employee feedback. So I guess saying that this is saying you have to make a report to the Implementation Board, not that you report to the Implementation Board. So maybe that's the source of some of the confusion. But if I just kind of zoom back to like where we were 3 or 4 years ago when all this was coming together, there was a very, very strong desire to have people who are experiencing homelessness, who have had experienced homelessness, to have real oversight over the system design and implementation. And that spirit was maintained all the way through the signing of the MOU, where the Ombudsman Office is going to be a joint effort with the LEC. That now has been rejected on very legalistic terms, that the MOU was like technically with the.
May I ask you a question, Ben? I don't mean to
if you don't
interrupt
mind.
you.
Can I just finish first, and then I'll.
Yes, deja vu, but please
Yeah.
finish.
Thank you. I think that where we're moving away from that model, right? from having that direct oversight of people with lived experience over the RHA. And now we're saying this Ombudsman is not even really a real Ombuds. It's like just a customer service operation. That's kind of what I heard you were saying there. And so my question really for all of us on the board is, are we okay with that direction? I understand that there were some issues with the building changes as the fiscal sponsor for the LEC, and LEC's had other issues. I think we all can acknowledge that. But getting aside the personalities in the organizations, do we not want people with lived experience to have some direct oversight in this organization, specifically on individual cases, which our organization could easily misinterpret or get things wrong on? I personally am just not comfortable with that. And if we're going to remove the LEC from the Ombuds governance system, I'd like to know what we're going to put in its place. What are the guardrails that we have to make sure that people with lived experience have direct experience, a direct link to what's happening day to day here? Because I personally believe that lived experience of homelessness is a very unique thing that, even though I work with people who've been through it, I just don't understand it, and I don't feel qualified to speak for them in many cases here. So I would just, that's, sorry, it's just a little, KCRHA, as long as I was going to speak, but please, I'd love to hear your question and your response.
KCRHA, I'm going to give you a moment to answer, and then, but I do want to remind everyone that KCRHA did make herself available to talk about the legality and everything that's going on in the ILA. KCRHA, if that is still open, I welcome members to reach out to KCRHA to talk one-on-one about this. But KCRHA, we'll shoot it back to you to respond.
I do want to ask a rhetorical question, because I'm kind of offended by the way that was framed, as if we don't care about people with lived experience. First of all, the majority of my team are people with lived experience. We hear from people with lived experience every single day. And many of the people with lived experience, we have got concerns and complaints about the very organizations that you are trying to highlight. Now, do you honestly believe that a joint office with the LEC, an organization that has no oversight and has caused irreparable harm to people with lived experience in this community, would actually provide independence, accountability, or neutrality for the Ombuds office? I just feel like every time I come before this board, we have to litigate this issue, and it is called extreme obstruction in our ability to be able to do the work. You saw from 2022 to 2023 just how many more contacts we actually had. And you know why? It's because it was not dealing with the LEC nonsense. And I'm sorry to put it that way, but it's just so offensive to me, because not only have constituents and communities been harmed by the Lived Experience Coalition, my colleagues have been harmed, my team, I've witnessed other people harmed, and I'm just tired of having this conversation. It's not helpful, and it's actually causing tokenization, and we need to stop it. And it just seems like what it's actually doing is this performative notion of supporting people with lived experience. And I don't want to do anything performative. And I believe my team has really, thought really hard about how we're going to continue to engage people with lived experience. It is something that we each care about deeply. So please, whether it's you, Sarah Rankin, or you, Benjamin, please do not in any way, shape, or form imply that we don't care about people with lived experience. And I don't know if you guys are going back and forth, texting with members of the lived experience to kind of coordinate how you want to send your message, but I'm tired of it. Because we are public servants, and I am responsible as the Ombuds to serve every single member of this community, not just one organization.
Thank you, KCRHA. Juanita, I see that your hand is raised. Oh, yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to, I think there's tension in the room, and just kind of take some deep breaths, because PTSD is very real, and dealing with systems that are racist. I've experienced multiple systems that have violated my rights, and because of the LEC and All Home and the mayor at that time, in collaboration with multiple systems, came together to work together. And with the lived experience, with the theory of change, this is the first. And with the Ombudsman office and me personally attending meetings and being homeless at that time in 2019, coming on in the beginning, not the very early beginning, but for the first time in my life, the words that I heard in those meetings was the first time I ever heard anything like that. And this is my own story, my own testimony, and being in a place to hear truth and also to talk about equity and what that was and what it looked like. And me being a mother, having multiple children and having domestic violence and being a survivor and just dealing with different types of abuse in systems and where people with power not really acknowledging my right. So that's where I'm speaking from. I'm Native American, I'm Northern Cheyenne enrolled member in the state of Montana. And I just want to say I come in peace. I really don't like gatekeeping. I don't like being a part of that world. And I stood in line with Helen before and just talking to a trainer, I said, I think I want to be a healer. I want to be able to bring together people in broken systems and have justice and be able to bring reconciliation and bring love. And so the different people that kind of opened this door for me were very beautiful, doing this work in anti-racist work. And so I just know that to really come together and work together, it takes a lot of work, and to be intentional about these things and just to remember our history and what collaboration looked like at that time, and really bringing voices that were not voices, that were not heard. And this is like all across cultures in a diverse community such as King County. And I just know that people gave me a voice, and we're not just talking like talking circle, but actually really teaching me and demonstrating and having people that I could watch and learn from, and people I highly respect in their organizing. And it was very enriching for me. And I just pray, I'm a person of prayer. I try to bring culture into at these tables, and we have so many different diversity ways how each culture is represented, but we want all the voices to be in these places and to be heard. And I just know that the Ombudsman idea did come from the Lived Experience Coalition. That was something that we talked about. We also talked about the homeless having rights. Being a DV survivor, they tell survivors that you have a Bill of Rights. I think that's important to remind each other, all of us. I know with others, to empower me to be free from abuse, all forms of abuse, that I have a right and I have a voice. And because of the historical trauma and the genocide, the people, we're talking about stolen lands and this territory and the East Coast Salish territory and other tribes from everywhere and other indigenous communities that come in from outside of Turtle Island. We have to remember there was treaties that were made, but nobody enforced them. And because of that genocide, there was multiple massacres. Where was their right to be safe? their right to be heard, and nobody enforced those rights of those treaties and those contracts. And I'm
Juanita?
here just to remind people, listen with your heart and, you know, really come to a place of unity and collaboration. And that was the work that Jenny Durkin, that her legacy opened that door for all of us. So that's all I want to say. Thank you everyone for your time. Trauma is very real. At the last meeting, I couldn't deal with it. It was too challenging for me at that time and I had to take care of myself. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Juanita, thank you for calling in the tension in the room. I, again, encourage everyone to, one, read the ILA, and then we can circle back to this, and then reach out to KCRHA individually if people have questions. We are pushing up against time. John and Sarah, I see that you have your hands raised. Would love to invite you into this space, but then we'll probably just have us move on right after that. John, you're up.
Oh, sure. So I'm just trying to get my hand to lower. Juanita, thank you for speaking to the tension in the room, and also thank you to the comment to listen from your heart. So I'm going to try to do that and maybe say some things a little differently than I would have had you not been called on first. It's time to put this to bed. We need to move on. It just is. KCRHA just showed how independent she is, and I thank her for that. I have not had an opportunity to talk to her recently, but a couple of months ago did. We went with KCRHA, we went through what's in the ILA, that is our governing document. We went with what's there. I think what she is doing is the right thing, and it's just time to put this discussion aside and continue with the operation of an excellent ombuds office, and to help people. That's the most important thing. We need to focus not on arguing among ourselves about how we think the little systems should work. We need to focus on getting people help. I'm going to stop at that, and I guess Sarah, I guess you're up next.
Thanks, John. You know, I think it's critical that everyone on this board feel that our purpose is to ensure the accountability of the KCRHA. And if we can't have discussions about independence and accountability on the implementation board about the KCRHA and the different parts of the KCRHA without it exploding into ad hominem attacks, I think it's problematic. I think the tenor of this conversation became very unfortunate. I don't doubt that everyone here wants to see the KCRHA succeed. I also don't doubt that everyone here believes in the power and the importance of the theory of change, which means that we have to center people with lived experience. But I also don't think it's appropriate for any of us to resort to personal attacks or emotional attacks on any group or individual, or to question the intentions or the commitment of anyone. And so I am pushing these issues because I think ensuring the independence of the Ombuds office is extraordinarily important. I think it is concerning to honestly, I think that, like I said, the tenor of this conversation is very concerning to me, because it makes me worry about people who are part of the LEC and how they'll be treated. I think this board, the reason that I'm on it is because I want to see the KCRHA succeed, but I'm not going to bow to it. I'm going to make sure that independence and accountability are an important part of what we do as a board. So I really don't know how the tenor of the conversation switched to be so volatile, but I accept Juanita's invitation for all of us to try to come together and remember that we're all here for the same reason, and all of us believe in this work. And I like that to think that we believe in each other.
Thank you, Member Rankin. Again, invite everyone to read the ILA and to reach out to KCRHA. I think we continue, like John said, we need to put this to bed. We continue to show up in these meetings and circle around the same things and don't do anything else around in outside time. So we all agree, we've all read the ILA, we all understand the Ombuds office and KCRHA's role and the role of her team. If people would like to take this offline in their own time, not in a public forum, welcome to do so. Please reach out to Helen and KCRHA. But now I'm going to move us along to severe weather planning. So invite Alexis and Peter into this space to explain what is going on there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chair. For the record, my name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Subregional Planning. I'll allow our Chief Program Officer to introduce himself while I get the screen ready.
Thank you, Alexis. Peter Lynn, I use he, him pronouns, and am the Chief Program Officer.
So thank you for the time today to discuss severe weather. This is a very large body of work that involves a lot of teams. And so hoping to cover a few subtopics within the larger topic of severe weather to clarify and discuss our role and work to date in this area, and then discuss also our severe weather policy related to thresholds, funding, and staffing, and then provide an update on how our work in severe weather is working towards implementing the 5-year plan. So by way of overview, our KCRHA's role with regards to severe weather is to lead engagement and coordination with service providers, both contracted service providers for severe weather, but also coordination with service providers that provide severe weather support during hazardous weather events. We also develop and maintain an agency policy and operational playbook in response to multiple severe weather events. We coordinate with cities around King County, as well as other King County agencies, such as King County Metro, King County Office of Emergency Management, and so on, when it comes to public communications in response to severe weather. And we monitor the official severe weather contract per our master services agreement with the City of Seattle. And as Interim CEO Howell mentioned at the beginning of today's meeting, we are looking at standing up additional contracts and partnerships with other jurisdictions to support increased severe weather response. To speak on our work to date in this area, since really the first severe weather event of December 2021, we have activated severe weather protocols over 10 times for a total of over 70 nights. A lot of preparation work has gone into trying to prepare and modify our response as appropriate to best serve people during these events. We have responded to heat events, smoke events, cold events, and snow events. And with that, also conducted a series of needs and infrastructure investments, from doing a widespread survey with emergency services programs like day centers and emergency shelters with drop-in to evaluate our localized infrastructure. So do programs have AC? What is the kind of HVAC systems that our programs have, and so on. We've conducted tabletop exercises in partnership with other government partners from cities, but also with countywide agencies. And we have stood up an official severe weather activation page. I do want to note for the public that may be watching previously, we've provided information around available severe weather resources through a blog post. That has since changed. There is now a singular activation page, which will continue to be updated. So there's one landing page that you can consistently go to rather than needing to find the appropriate blog post. So we can make sure that that is shared with the board following today as well. And as a result, from all of the learnings of the previous bullet points, we have developed a severe weather policy and alignment that really speaks to how we distribute resources. And we've been looking at developing and have developed some playbooks that really dictate what the work of the various KCRHA teams that do work in severe weather, what they do. And so with that, that takes us into our next topic, just a discussion on our policies and procedures. We have developed a official agency policy that really dictates activation of resources for sites, funding, and staffing. And so this is available on our website. There are 3 sections. The first section being our activation thresholds, which I'll talk about momentarily. The second section being our funding policies, and the third section, staffing policies. It's important to note that this severe weather policy document is really pertaining to these areas. We have other documentation that is our operational activities, which essentially dictates when we go into a severe weather event, such as when we get that forecast, what do we do? Those kind of action step pieces. Those are captured by our playbooks. So we have weather specific playbooks that really will help the staff and teams kind of walk through what are the action steps that need to be taken up. And we model these after the King County Office of Emergency Management kind of template in order to ensure cross agency coordination and alignment. So going into our first area of the severe weather policy, we have our activation thresholds. First, to discuss and talk about severe weather response and heat. We have been in close coordination and working with the National Weather Service to be using and really piloting the National Weather Service's heat risk tool. This heat risk tool takes into account a myriad of factors. And so we will receive daily updates that forecast out any potential heat risk. The heat risk tool incorporates elements such as looking at overnight highs and lows, daytime lows, humidity, and so on. But it really is centered on real feel and human condition. So it'll also take into account the greater temperature context. So for example, a 80-degree day in the middle of February is going to have more of a higher effect on the human body than an 80-degree day in July. So I bring that up to say we are going by a color system. So we're moving away from this, in some ways, what was the previous system, which was when we have a day that's above 85 degrees, now we're activated. Instead, we're using this tool, again, developed by the National Weather Service, that really centers what is the effect of heat on the human body, taking into account all of those factors. So we have 3 tiers, the tier 2 being, or tier 1 being a yellow tier, where we're really looking at dissemination of public health information around heat safety, and I've been working with Healthcare for the Homeless Network on that. Tier 2 is kind of bifurcated, where we have if it's more than 24 hours versus if it's less than 24 hours. And then when we get into tier 3, this is when the heat risk indicates being a red day or a magenta day. This is when we're looking at standing up cooling tents or canopies and doing increased outreach to individuals, while coordinating with our transit partners and expanding any hours for cooling centers around the region. When we go into cold response, we also have 3 tiers. Unfortunately, at this time, we don't have a comparable tool for cold risk. So we have developed these thresholds were developed by when we had our chief health officer on board, who had robust experience working in the public health mobile medical van and serving our unhoused neighbors throughout South King County, trying to identify and be able to make the activation thresholds lower, so they're technically activating at higher temperatures. That being said, we have 3 tiers here, the first of which being less than 45 degrees as a daily high for 72 hours. And then moving towards tier 2, which is when we would begin activating over expanded shelter capacity and food and supply distribution. And then tier 3, which would be expanding and looking at how we activate more overnight shelter during these events. That's a little bit on our activation thresholds related to weather events. Again, this is more divulged in the policy document that is available on our website. As we move into the next area of the policy document, we have this section really outlines eligibility. So looking at our service system and which programs are eligible. We wanted to be strategic with, as should funding become available for distributing to programs, we want to ensure that those funding opportunities are going to programs that are most directly interfacing with those who may be coming from unsheltered homelessness and at risk while facing those elements. And then this section also divulges the general procurement guidelines to ensure that we're in accordance with the procurement policy, while also building in severe weather allowances. This is in accordance with some of the language in the 5-year plan, and then looking at how we can stand up additional funding for severe weather supplies. The last section of the policy just speaks to staffing policies. This section outlines the roles and responsibilities for KCRHA internal staff. We have severe weather leads that are in the programs division, as well as external affairs. And this section also outlines the weather emergency response crew. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of staff work on severe weather. We have the need to be updating the blog post, which means our amazing comms team is consistently updating all of that information to make sure it is accurate and timely. We have our emergency services team that oversees our contract with the Salvation Army to ensure activation of cooling centers and warming centers and overnight shelter. We have our capacity team that is consistently working and keeping a pulse on what our region's capacity and capacity needs are. Sub-regional team that is standing up and working on calls in coordination with other cities and government partners and so on. And that's just to give you as a board a flavor of just how robust the work in this area is and how many different teams are affected. And of course, I can't forget to mention our finance crew, which is helping us be able to distribute and get funding out the door. With that, I want to close with just discussing some of how the work in this area is working towards implementing the 5-year plan. In almost every area of the 5-year plan that speaks to severe weather, we're really focusing on. We have made some progress in implementing in terms of discussions with faith-based partners to evaluate if there's additional spaces we can tap into, coordinating with cities to expand indoor options, looking at how we can also innovate and have severe weather response that can have more innovative practices, especially when it comes to being able to getting folks connected to the larger service ecosystem, expanding outreach contracts, something that we were able to do in the most recent heat event. Looking at how we can again improve guest connection is something that the team is just starting to work on, and further consolidating our severe weather emergency response functions. And some good work has been done around aligning some of our thresholds with our other cities around the region, such as our South King County cities. We've been in discussion about how we can all be working under the same activation thresholds. And as a final note before we fully wrap up, I would like to provide the update that we do have the notice of funding availability posted on our website for expanding North King County severe weather response, and just want to take a moment to champion the partnership. Each of the 5 cities already of which had signed into an agreement for homeless services with us, KCRHA, and we're administering their contracts, have agreed to chip in additional funding in order to bring on board a service provider for North King County to address winter weather for this upcoming season. And so that RFP will be posted shortly, but there is a notice of funding availability on the website. And with that, happy to take any questions that the board may have. Thank you for your time.
Member McHenry, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, a comment and a question. First of all, I appreciate the briefing. That's, I guess, 2 comments and a question. Appreciate this briefing. Really was pleased to see that your team is doing tabletop exercises, which is, I think, really important in terms of not having a static solution or response, but actually evolving it. And then here's my question, which is in all seriousness, and it may be that it's not directly related to adverse weather, severe weather, but we've all witnessed wind-blown firestorm, which is Maui, flooding in Libya, earthquake in Turkey. And so should that happen in King County, is this the same team that would have a response for whether it's a disaster of that nature? Yeah.
I deeply appreciate that question, board member. And that's something that our team has been looking to work in partnership with King County Office of Emergency Management on. There is disaster recovery type divisions that we've been working to align on, but I'm seeing Peter nodding, and I think he might have more to share on that front.
We are a part of the overall emergency response in the event of a broad, large scale natural disaster, and obviously that has an impact. Depending on what kind of disaster it is, it could take multiple shapes. We do have severe weather response when the air quality index dips below, and that has occurred when in some of the fires. Obviously, we are a seismically active region, and I will toss salt, but that is one potential, and flooding also is another area, and we want to make sure that people, particularly where flooding is emerging when encampments might be submerged or might be impacted, that's all part of it. But the overall response would be in coordination with our Office of Emergency Management.
And I appreciate that, and Chair Carvalho, I think, at least for me, it would be great, maybe like once a year we hear from RHA on how they're doing with regard to this collaborative effort in the event of a disaster, because it will happen to us in this region at some point in the future. And I think it is, it's not for us to micromanage, but I think it is an appropriate question for us to ask: how does RHA feel we are as a system in responding to that kind of a natural disaster that's above and beyond the severe weather that is very recurrent? So thank you very much for that dialogue.
Awesome. Thank you for that recommendation. We'll make sure to take note of that. Anyone else? Oh, Member Merritt, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you, Alexis, for that. I just want to call out that this is, exactly why the KCRHA was formed, was to be able to take these regional problems, taking place processes that were good from different regions, and then put them together and then innovate. And I really love that you're building on the learnings that we had last year to try and really come into this season better. I just think I just want to really applaud you for that, and celebrate this as a example of our system working. I just want to make one comment. This isn't about what you're doing. It's just about how we're set up here. The reason we need emergency weather response is because we don't have enough shelter. If we had enough shelter year round, this wouldn't even be a conversation. And so this comes back to my hobby horse of really trying to increase the number of shelter units of all types, so that we don't have to be scrambling when we get these weather events that we know are going to happen, year round in all seasons. So I think it kind of comes back, Alexis, to the work I think you did on the shelter inventory that we had a year and a half ago, and helping to kind of track the progress towards really bringing the shelter inventory that we have in line with the number of people that we know are unsheltered, so that we don't have these issues. And of course, that ties back to the PIC count, so we actually know how many people are unsheltered. So I'll just use that to tie a bow around the comments that I made today. But most importantly, thank you to you and your team for this.
Awesome. Any more questions or comments for Alexis and Peter? Okay. Before I adjourn us, I just want to remind everyone that on Wednesday, September 27th, from 2 to 2:30, we do have a special meeting. Myself, Ben, and Christopher have been working to get a firm onboarded to do the CEO search. That RFP has closed. We've narrowed it down to our top 3, and we just kind of need a quorum so that everyone can kind of vote on the contract, and Helen can sign it, and we can move forward with hiring. And that is it. Everything has been completed. Thank you all for showing up. Thank the staff for preparing. Again, we are board members until our terms are over. If there is something extra or something you'd like to kind of spearhead, that door is always open. So feel free to raise your hand whenever there's something you want to spearhead. And we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.